Chapter 26, A Security Zone of the Future. For the past 5 evenings, Nikolai Ivanich, the warden of a maximum security correctional facility, in plain language a prison, had not been able to leave his office at the usual time. When his workday officially ended, he turned his telephone ringer off and began pacing his office, deep in contemplation. Occasionally, he would sit down at his desk, pick up the green folder lying on it, and peruse its contents for the upteenth time. A convict serving time for an infraction of Article 93, Clause 1 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation had put forward a petition to him on behalf of a group of inmates in Cell 26, with what at first glance looked like an unthinkable proposal. The convict, whose name was Kodakov, proposed acquiring for the facility 100 hectares of abandoned or unused arable land to be surrounded by a barbed wire fence with a watchtower at each corner, in other words, taking all due precautions to prevent escapes. On this fenced-in 100 acres, 90 prisoners would be engaged in agricultural labor. The applications of those interested were kept in a file in this green folder. In their applications, these prisoners committed themselves to supply the whole facility with vegetables to the tune of half of all the produce they grew on the land. The other half they asked to be sent to their families. So far, nothing impossible in their request. In various correctional facilities, prisoners are engaged in manufacturing activity. In some cases, this involves crafting simple objects in woodworking shops. In others, organized textile production, where prisoners sew simple items of clothing, such as quilted jackets or underpants, and receive a nominal wage for their work. The low wage is also due to their rather low level of productivity involved. According to the proposal in the file, prisoners wanted to take up agriculture. Well, no problem there either. A payment of half of their produce was entirely feasible. No need to bother with selling stuff or shipping off products on consignment and then waiting months for the proceeds to come in, but that wasn't all. Kodakov, on behalf of the other prisoners, asked that the 100 hectares be divided into 1 hectare plots, each plot to be assigned to a specific prisoner. In addition, they asked that each prisoner be granted the right to build a 1-room cell hut on their plot. There was also a request that any prisoner who wished to be allowed to stay on their land after serving their sentence, and then for the prison not to collect as a levy, but to purchase surplus produce from them, as well as to allow them to enlarge their dwellings. The file containing the proposal or request had been given to Nikolai for as far as back as 6 months ago. Nikolai. Along with 90 applications and the text of the proposal, the file also included plans for the future plots, handsomely executed in colored pencil. The drawings showed the watchtowers, the barbed wire, and the controlled entry point. After his initial reading, Nikolai tucked the green folder away in the bottom drawer of his desk. From time to time, he would mentally go over its contents, but he had not given any answer to the prisoners. A certain circumstance had come about, however, which caused the warden to spend every evening over the past 5 days in intensive contemplation of the prisoner's proposal. An order had come from the National Administration to take steps, beginning the following year, to enlarge the facility and construct additional cells, with a view to being ready to accept 150 new convicts by the year's end. The order was accompanied by plans for additional wards to be attached to the existing buildings, along with a financing schedule. It was proposed to use prisoner labor in the construction. Nikolai Ivanich mused as follows. The financing will be delayed as usual. There will be problems procuring low-cost materials. They put one set of prices for construction materials into the budget, but when it comes to actually building, it's something else already. Prisoner labor is never very efficient. The order is patently impossible to carry out. But there is no question that it had to be carried out. Nikolai's retirement was only 5 years away. He had already attained the rank of colonel. He had been the warden of this facility for 20 years now, without a single black mark on his record. And now this order. But these concerns were not the uppermost of the colonel's deliberations. The green folder. In his memo, prisoner Kodakov stated that his proposal would fulfill the principal objective of incarcerating prisoners in such institutions, namely rehabilitation. The fact that the modern correctional institutions seldom succeed in their rehabilitation efforts, indeed, quite contrary, they end up producing more experienced criminals, was not lost on Nikolai Ivanitch. Even if this were not so, you wouldn't get them coming back to prison for the second or third time. If this were not so, you wouldn't get them coming back to prison for the second or third time. Nikolai had given a great deal of time and energy to his calling and was extremely disturbed by this situation. His life was getting on now. His term of service was coming to an end. And what was there to show for it? A nursery for criminals, as it turned out. The green folder. How infectious it was. If he could confidently conclude that there was something unacceptable in the proposal the file contained. But no, something inside him would not let him reject it out of hand, but neither could he bring himself to fully support it. It was an offbeat, unconventional proposal. The next morning, the colonel's first order of the day was to have the prisoner Kodakov from cell 26 brought into his office. "You can take a seat, Mr. Kodakov," said Nikolai Ivanitch to the man who had just come in, accompanied by an escort guard. The warden gestured to a chair. "I've just been looking over the contents of your file. I have a specific question for you." "Sir," the prisoner hastened to reply, getting up from his chair. "Sit," the guard commanded. "Yes, do sit down," the prison warden replied softly. "No need to jump to your feet the way they do in court." Turning to the escort guard, he added, "You can wait for us outside." "So, Sergei Yurovich Kodakov, I must say you've submitted a rather strange proposal." "It only seems strange on the surface. In fact, the proposal is extremely reasonable." "Tell me directly, flat out, what kind of cunning plan you've thought up here. Are you aiming to set up the conditions for a mass escape? The 90 candidates applying are all serving sentences between 5 and 9 years. Does this mean you want your freedom sooner?" "If there's any cunning plan in this proposal, it has nothing to do with escape, sir." Again, the prisoner rose and showed signs of concern. "You've got the wrong impression. Just sit down and relax. And let's dispense with the sir. I'm Nikolai Ivanitch. I know from your file that you are Sergei Yurovich. You used to be a psychologist. You defended your thesis and then went right into business. Your sentence was for major embezzlement, right?" "Yes, I was sentenced. It was back at the beginning of Perestroika. After all, Nikolai Ivanitch, you get used to one set of laws and then suddenly new ones come out." Okay, that's not the issue here. Explain to me what you have in mind with this agricultural zone with a barbed wire fence. Or is there another name for it?" "Please allow me to try to explain, Nikolai Ivanitch. It's hard for me to do that because of a particular circumstance." "What circumstance?" "You see, we've been reading this book. It's called Anastasia. Then along came another book, a sequel. Anyway, the book talks about man's purpose in life, about how if everyone living on the earth took a hectare of land and created a corner of paradise on it, the whole earth would be transformed into a paradise. The book explains this very simply and convincingly." "Sounds pretty simple to me. If everyone took and created, well, then of course the whole earth would be transformed. But what's this got to do with your proposal?" "I'm trying to tell you, it's all outlined very persuasively in these books. Now some people might just glance over them superficially and not get everything. But we have the time. We've been reading and discussing them, and we understand them." "So what have you got out of it?" "After reading these books, a whole lot of people have the desire to acquire their own land and create a paradise oasis in their own kin's domain. They're free. They can do this. So we have decided, even if it's behind barbed wire, we can still each take a hectare of land, work on it, make it into something beautiful, By way of a penalty, we suggest handing over half or even more of our produce either to the facility or to the public at large. But we do have a special request that our plot is not taken away from us once we've served our sentence. In other words, those who want to stay on there can remain. So, what does that mean? That you're going to live out the rest of your lives under the guards' rifle muzzles? After we've all served our sentences, you can take away the barbed wire fences and cart them off for use somewhere else, along with the towers. You can use them in another location for a new group of prisoners who want to fix up their own domains while we stay put on ours. Aha, and when their time's up, we switch the towers and barbed wire to a third location while they go on living on their land. Is that it? You got it. That's some sort of phantasmagoria. What is it? You want me, the warden of this facility, to create paradise oases for my prisoners? And you're certain that this really can work? I'm absolutely convinced it will be a success. As a psychologist, I'm convinced, and it's something I feel in my heart. Judge for yourself, Nikolai Ivanitch. Someone serves 9 years behind bars and then walks free. He hasn't got any friends. His friends are back in the prison's security zone, or in their cells. His family doesn't want anything to do with him. Neither does society at large. Let's face it, who will give an ex-con a decent job? Most job categories are up to their ears in unemployed professionals. And look how many highly qualified people are standing in queue at employment centers. Our society provides no positions for ex-convicts. There's only one road ahead for them. Back to the old routine. And so they follow it, and they end up back here with you again. Yes, I know the scenario very well. What is the point in merely stating the obvious? Tell me, as a psychologist, why did the cons who read the books suddenly change and go for the idea of getting a piece of land behind a barbed wire fence? You see, they got a glimpse of eternity on the horizon. Like, people believe you're still alive, even in a prison cell, whereas in fact you're not. You're dead, because there's nothing left for you on life's horizon. What were you saying about this glimpse of eternity? I told you, it's hard for me to explain right off. It's all in the books. Okay, I'll read these books and try to figure out what's made you wax so lyrical over this. Then we'll talk again. Guard, you can take him away. Prisoner Kodakov got up, put his hands behind his back, and asked, "May I ask one more question?" "Go ahead," the colonel agreed. "When we were working out the plan for this security zone, we all took existing regulations for prisoner holding into account. The proposal does not allow for any violation of these regulations." Well, I'll say you've thought of everything. Regulations, no violation. I'll check it out. Then Nikolai Ivanitch ordered the guard to take him away. Subsequently, the warden called in the prison's legal counsel. He handed him the file and said, "Here, take this. Study it thoroughly and determine where there are any violations of prisoner holding regulations. Report back to me in 48 hours. 48 hours later, the legal counsel was sitting in the warden's office. He began his report with a few evasive phrases, atypical for his profession. The thing is, Nikolai Ivanitch, that from this point of view of the law and the regulations governing the holding of prisoners in so-called places of confinement, the proposal in the question cannot be treated as an open and shut case." What kind of spin are you trying to give me here, Vasily? Like a lawyer in a court? You and I have known each other for 15 years. Nikolai Ivanitch got up from his desk. For some reason, he appeared flustered. After pacing around the room for a while, he sat down again and continued. "Tell me specifically what have we here by way of regulation violations?" Specifically, well, if you want it specifically, I'll have to take it one step at a time. All right, then, one step at a time. We're talking about forming a new security zone here. The proposal allows for the isolation of this area from the outside world. This 100-hectare zone will be fenced off with 2 rows of barbed wire. Watchtowers are also provided for. The zone is secured in full accordance with regulations. The document goes on to propose the dividing of the security zone into individual plots of 1 hectare each and assigning each plot to a particular prisoner. Well, what is there to say? The regulations state that we should accustom the unconscientious citizens in our charge to hard work, create workshop units for basic production, as well as set up a subsidiary farm and work toward partial self-financing. After all, the law allows for the setting up of institutions such as ours with special provisions for economic activity and multi-purpose use for forest reserves. Footnote, editor's footnote from the Russian edition. Law of the Russian Federation of 21st of July, 1993, amended on March 9th, 2001, on institutions and agencies administering criminal punishment in the form of confinement. In our case, this proposal envisages the setting up of subsidiary farm, which will provide those in our charge with a supply of fresh vegetables, with maybe some left over for sale. So far, we're entirely within the limits of the law. Don't draw things out. What's next? Where do we go beyond the limits? Well, next it's proposed to construct a separate cell on each plot to provide living accommodations for the prisoner. The one the plot is assigned to as a workspace. That's right, each one will have his own individual cell on his piece of land. The thing is we don't have enough funds to buy regular beds, and here they're asking for a separate cell with all the amenities and furnishings. A utopia. I guess you didn't take a thorough look at all the details of the proposal, Nikolai. What do you mean, not a thorough look? I practically memorized the thing. I don't know about that. There's an attachment here giving plans and a description of the interior of this individual cell. Everything is strictly according to regulations. 1 bed, 1 toilet, 1 table, 1 chair, 1 bookshelf, 1 nightstand, a metal door with a peephole and an exterior lock. Bars on the window. As for financing, it's spelled out here specifically. Each prisoner is responsible for funding the construction of his own individual cell. That wasn't in the document I saw. I don't know about that. Take a look for yourself. It's there. In the sketch, the working drawings for the builder, and the description. What do you mean it's there? It wasn't there when I handed you the file over. I distinctly remember that it wasn't. I've been over that file a dozen times from cover to cover, and here you... In 2 days? Yes, I did it, Kolya. I was the one. Only not in 2 days. They gave me a similar file 3 whole months ago. I recently put in my own additions and corrections, to which they agreed. Why didn't you say anything to me about this earlier? You yourself only asked for my opinion 2 days ago. Okay. Let's hear what you have to say about all this. Here's what I think, Nikolai. If the proposal comes to fruition, there will be a significant decrease in the number of prisons and labor camps in the country. The crime rate will be cut in half, and you, Nikolai Ivanich, will go down in history as a genius of a reformer. Never mind history, let's get to the nitty-gritty. Will it fly from a legal standpoint? Nikolai Ivanich once again got up from his desk and began pacing the room. The legal counsel turned to the warden, who was still pacing the room in serious contemplation, and inquired, "What are you so concerned about, Nikolai?" Me? Concerned? What have I got to be concerned about? Anyway, no, you're right, Vasily. I am concerned. I'm concerned because I can't decide what I should say about this proposal in my brief to the general. Oh, that's it. You've decided to support it, after all? You've been thinking about taking it to the general? I've been contemplating it. I was thinking you might shoot the proposal down and persuade me not to go see the general. That would be a weight off my shoulders. So I guess you're in favor of it. Yes, I am. That means I've got to go, Nikolai Ivanich concluded in a rather cheerful tone, as though he had actually been Afraid his friend might shoot the proposal down, the warden stepped over to a cupboard and took down a bottle of cognac along with some lemon and 2 shot glasses. Let's drink, Vasily, to our success. Tell me, when was it you found yourself so favorably disposed toward this file? It wasn't right away. Same here. My daughter is doing a law degree in an institute. She's in the middle of writing her graduating essay on the influence of incarceration on the eradication of criminal acts. She gave me a draft to read. I read it, and just listen to what she says. 90% of those who serve their time in incarceration reoffend. The underlying cause behind these depressing criminal statistics is the following: a person's upbringing which has led him to the committing of a criminal act, the challenge of adapting to society following the period of incarceration, the formation of a criminal worldview during the period of incarceration in a criminal environment. Do you realize what her conclusions mean, Nikolai? It turns out that you and I, just by honestly trying to do our duty, are actually helping shape a criminal worldview. We don't shape anything. We act in accord with the regulations, the laws, and the orders that we are given. Although, I do have a lurking sense of dissatisfaction here. I used to put it out of my thought. I've been trying to convince myself that it's none of my business. Then this file appeared. I've been contemplating it for 6 months now. And I finally decided to go see the general. Only, even though I've sat down several times to rewrite the report, make it sound more intelligible, it's still not coming. Let's try it together. I think the main thing is to not scare the general off by making it sound too original or outlandish. We've got to simplify it. I agree, it should be simpler. But how? Especially since they're asking me to have the land turned over to each prisoner for a lifetime use after they've finished serving their sentence. Yes, that aspect does not seem realistic for the time being. We don't have any federal law at the moment on the allocation of land for lifetime use. I've thought about this point. We'll just have to be honest with them. When they've finished serving their time, the question will be taken up in the context of the land legislation in existence at that time. I think they'll understand. Everybody knows you can't go above the law. We don't make the laws. But we should also point out the direction we see things heading. Right now, it all seems to be leading to a law permitting private ownership of land. God willing, affirmed Nikolai Ivanitch as he poured out a second round of cognac. Let's just have another wee dram. To success. They clinked glasses. Then all at once, Nikolai Ivanitch put his glass down on the table and once more began pacing the room. Don't tell me you're concerned again, asked the legal counsel. You see, Vasily, Nikolai Ivanitch rattled on anxiously without pausing. You and I here have been dreaming big dreams, like youngsters. We've got carried away with our dreams, forgetting that we're dealing here with criminals. There are some among them, of course, that simply took a wrong turn and may be sincerely willing to get their lives back together within the limits of the law, but the majority of them are hardcore criminals, rounders, through and through. They've got an entirely different agenda, and what kind of gimmick are they trying to pull here? I've thought about that too, Nikolai, but let's do a test first, and afterward you can see whether to report to the general or not. How are we going to test them? Here's how. Tell me, when did they give you this file? About 6 months ago. That means they've been discussing this project for more than 6 months now, working out the drawings and the plans. Then they put it all beautifully into a folder and attached 90 application forms. So let's you and I gather all the applicants together, suddenly and without warning, in the auditorium. We'll invite specialists, say agronomists, specialists in vegetable growing, and have them examine the lot. The examiners can ask questions about things like what to plant in the soil and when, and we shall see how many would-be responders there are. If they're really serious about this, they've got a hold of this idea without any ulterior motives. If it's a real dream with them, they won't just sit on their fannies, would they now, waiting for the proposal's answer. They've got to be studying agrotechnology. That's something, Vasily. Can you imagine Rounders spending half a year boning up on how to plant flowers and cucumbers? That's really steep. Maybe a chap raised in the country might know the answer, but for these... That's what I'm telling you. Let's test them before deciding whether to go see the general or not. Upon entering the auditorium, they found not 90, but 200 prisoners sitting there. By the time the warden had invited the specialists in agrotechnology, 2 instructors from the Agricultural Institute and 1 from the college, the number of would-be domain dwellers had reached 200 prisoners. The prisoners had taken their seats in the auditorium, not suspecting that they were going to be given a test. They saw 3 people sitting behind the table on stage and had no idea who they were. The warden came out and announced, "In connection with the proposal to organize a subsidiary farm, we need to consult people acquainted with agriculture. Anyway, I am happy to present to you 3 instructors from specialized educational institutions. They will be asking you questions. After that, we shall decide who among you may be entrusted with a plot of land." Nikolai Ivanitch introduced each of the 3 instructors in turn and invited them to put questions to the gathering. The first to ask a question was an elderly instructor from the Agricultural College, seated at the right of the stage. "Who among you, sirs, can tell me what time of year tomato seeds should be planted for the propagation of seedlings? When should the seedlings be transplanted into the ground? And if you're familiar with the term slinging out, tell me then, please, what signs indicate the need to use it?" He's got him on the run now, thought Nikolai. A bunch of questions all together in one. I bet even my wife, who's a veteran dachnik, can't even handle those from memory. She'd always check the books before planting anything. Now, look how quiet everyone is. Not a stir. The silence in this hall disturbed Nikolai Ivanitch. He secretly hoped the project would actually come to fruition. The only reason he was being so picky about it was not the fact that he wanted to reject it, but he wanted to eliminate any flaws or defects in advance. The silence in the hall indicated that the project was being treated as less than serious by the participants most involved, who argued poorly for its chances of success. "Come on now," he agonized. "Not a single answer? Isn't there at least one country lad out there?" And in the country, it's more often that women than men do the vegetable planting. To somehow compensate for the awkward pause, Nikolai Ivanitch stood up from the table and said in a severe tone, "What's up, lads? Didn't you get the question?" "We got it," replied a young prisoner seated in the front row. "Well, if you got it, then answer the question." "Who do you want to answer? You haven't called on anyone to come to the chalkboard." "What do you mean, who? What chalkboard? If anyone knows the answer, put up your hand." Instantly, all 200 prisoners present raised their hands. The examining instructors, who had been conversing amongst themselves, all at once fell silent. Nikolai Ivanitch was overcome with mixed feelings. On the one hand, he felt a sense of pride in his charges, as well as a renewed hope that the project might indeed come to fruition. On the other hand, a sense of alarm over whether any of the 200 who had raised their hands could give a satisfactory response to the question. "How about you answer?" He gestured to the talkative young prisoner sitting in the front row. The young man got to his feet. Stroking his bald head with his tattooed hand, he began to talk quickly and volubly. "The time for starting tomato seedlings would not be the same each year. It depends on the onset of reliable frost-free weather, which of course varies from year to year. If we take into account the need to plant the seedling into the ground before they bloom, along with the period of maturation, we can calculate the time the seeds should be planted for propagation under greenhouse conditions or on a windowsill." "That will do, young man," said the college instructor, interrupting the young prisoner's discourse. "Put up your hand, whoever can continue." Again, 200 hands were thrust into the air. The instructor gestured to an elderly prisoner, and by all appearances an old-time criminal with a gold filling in his mouth. The old fellow quickly rose to his feet and began speaking in sedate tones. They need good regular soil, not some kind of useless crap. You need to put them in some warm, processed humus or peat moss. You shouldn't plant seeds directly into pure peat moss like that. They can get used to the peat. They quickly get used to the peat, then when they're put in the garden, they'll be knocked for a loop. It'll be too different for them. So you need to take the peat and mix it with just a little bit of sand, using soil from the garden to dilute it, at least by half. You have to warm up their little earth nest for them, say about 25 degrees Celsius, which is, footnote, 77 degrees Fahrenheit, before sticking the seeds into the earth. That will do, the instructor interrupted. Basically, you explained everything correctly. Next one, continue. He pointed to a decent-looking, bespectacled prisoner in the third row. So your colleague left off saying, before planting tomato seeds in prepared soil, you have to... What do you have to do? The prisoner rose to his feet, straightened his spectacles, and continued. Before planting the seeds in the soil you've prepared for them, you must put them in your mouth and hold them in the saliva under your tongue for at least 9 minutes. Footnote. See the section entitled Seed as a Physician in Book 1, Chapter 11. The examiners seated at the table, as well as the warden, were shocked by this amazing declaration and stared at the bespectacled prisoner. After a brief pause, one of the institute instructors asked again, "Do you mean to say that before planting it in the soil, it should be moistened in water?" Never in water, certainly not in chlorinated or boiled water where all the vital bacteria are destroyed. It must be moistened with one's own saliva, to infuse it with information about oneself, after it has been in a man's mouth, after being in his saliva at a temperature of 36 degrees Fahrenheit, or 96.8 degrees, 36 degrees Celsius, 96.8 degrees Fahrenheit, i.e. normal body temperature. For 9 minutes, the seed will awaken from its dormancy and know right off what it is to do and for whom it is to bear fruit. If man is suffering from any ailments or abnormalities, the seed will try to bear fruit to remove such abnormalities. The three instructors held an impromptu discussion amongst themselves, then turned to Nikolai Ivanich. The college instructor queried, "Who taught your charges? What institute did you invite specialists to teach them?" Even days later, the warden still couldn't figure out how he could have tripped up on answering this question. He responded this way. "I don't really remember where they were from. I wasn't involved with that aspect, but I know they came from Moscow. A high-profile professor came." The prisoners in the auditorium caught on to the warden's fib at once. They realized he was trying to protect them, not letting the latest responder be made fun of by the examiners, and silently and gratefully, they in turn extended their support. The young prisoner in the front row, who had been the first to respond to the question, added, "We thought he wasn't just a professor, but an academician." Footnote, academician, a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences, a very high rank indeed. And he knows a lot about the Siberian taiga, about life in general. "That's right," added the prisoner beside him. "He's a real clever chap, that super scholar." From various corners of the hall could be heard rumblings of approbation of the professor from Moscow, whom none of them had ever seen in the first place. The second institute instructor, who had not spoken up until now, all at once began talking, trying to sound imposing. "Yes, colleagues, I seem to remember seeing this theory somewhere myself, although I can't remember where it was. Science today is moving in this direction. I find something intriguing in this. 36 degrees, actual human saliva, permeating with all kinds of vital bacteria. There's definitely something to this." Yes, I seem to recall it too," the college instructor echoed thoughtfully in an equally grandiose manner, giving the impression that he too had heard something. "This is one of the new tendencies in vegetable growing. Theoretically, of course, it is scientifically grounded, but we shall have to see how it works in practice." The prisoners seated in the hall gave fluent responses to a whole series of questions on agrotechnology. Their answers were not always of the standard variety, but the invited examiners were no longer in a hurry to offer counter-arguments. Quite the contrary, they listened with great interest. While the assistant warden went to see off the instructors, Nikolai Ivanitch sat silently at the table in front of the hushed auditorium. A deathly silence hung over the hall as he leafed through the contents of the green folder. Then the warden raised his head, surveyed the whole auditorium, and began to say, "I can tell you this, lads. I don't have a complete understanding of what it is that you're proposing. Not completely. So I've decided, in any case, I don't know what will come of it. I'm going to try and push it through with the central administration." The hushed auditorium, as though on command, suddenly rose to its feet and erupted in spontaneous applause. Taken completely by surprise at the reaction, Nikolai Ivanitch rose to his feet as well. Overcome by inexplicable embarrassment, he felt a pleasant and joyful sensation in his heart, but he managed to put on his best poker face, befitting his status as a no-nonsense warden, and said, "What's all this noise about? Take your seats." But even as he spoke, he could feel the inappropriateness of excessive severity in the given context, and added, "We still have to invite the professor from Moscow, all the same." Upon receiving Nikolai Ivanitch, the head of Correctional Facilities Central Administration, General Pasashkov, got right down to business. "It's not just you. Others, too, have been advising to upgrade their facilities, some just by 5 or 10 places, some by as much as 150. You should be ready to accept any additional contingent of prisoners within a year. They all say it's a challenge, it's unrealistic, and so our prisons are overcrowded. What would you have me do? Here I've got an order from the Justice Minister to make room for an additional 6,000 prisoners. But you've given me cheer, Nikolai Ivanitch. I heard you say you'll be ready to receive your share and right on time." "Yes, I will be ready, only there have to be some modifications to the project, as I have outlined in my report." "Yes, I know. I've read it. Only not everything's clear to me in your report. You want to get involved in agriculture. That's great. Assigning a separate plot to each prisoner. Who's stopping you? What makes you think you need my approval on this? But the notion of building a separate cell on each plot, that does sound rather strange. It's unreasonable. Go ahead and build 1 or 2 barracks. They can march to work each morning under guard. Less expensive. You'll get no additional financing for individual cells." "I'm not asking for additional financing." "What are you asking for, then?" I just need you to approve the overall plan for the individual cells on each plot." "And where is the money going to come from to build these units?" "From sponsors' subsidies." "You must have some pretty eccentric sponsors." "Look, okay, I don't have time to go into it. I'm going to write you a proposal. Review and complete, but I'll ring them up myself and tell them they should review and complete it with a due process. No delay. Is that it?" "There's just one minor problem." "What problem?" "I do not have any land I can use for a subsidiary farm." "So, go see the governor. Ask him." "I spoke with his deputy. They're considering, but that's all they're doing at the moment." "Okay, I will do what I can. I'll ring him up. Is that it?" "Yes, sir." "You can proceed. All the best." Nikolai Ivanitch's facility obtained the land, 200 hectares, by the autumn. The land was in an isolated area far from the nearest population point. They managed to truck in the barbed wire and 5-meter-tall posts required to construct the enclosure before the seasonal rains washed out the road. Nikolai realized that if the enclosure wasn't ready by the autumn, there was no way they could start cultivating the land on the plots the following spring. But how to get the posts into place, even if the backcountry road stopped 2 kilometers short of the allotted area? They wouldn't be able to get either the manpower or the equipment they needed for drilling the post holes to the designated site. When the prisoners learned about the problem, they put forward a proposal to the warden. They would dig the post holes by hand, cross the 2-kilometer stretch from the end of the road to the construction site on foot and under guard. Every day, even under the cold autumn rain, a a convoy of 50 prisoners marched out to the site, wearing homemade oilskins they had glued together from plastic sheeting. There had actually been even more volunteers, but because of a shortage of guards, only 50 could be accommodated at a time. The future landholders gave their all to their work. By the first frost, all the fence posts had been set up and connected by barbed wire, and the watchtowers were erected. Back at the cell block, they constructed a log cabin for the guard at the controlled entry point and put it in place too. The order was also submitted that autumn for the construction of the huts, the individual cells for the prisoners to live in, at a cost of 30,000 rubles each. There was no money left to pay for these. The prisoners set about raising the money where they could. Some had savings stored up from before their incarceration. Others were helped by relatives, but there were a few who found it impossible to raise such a sum from any source. They sent a memo to the warden letting him know of their willingness to live in tents, but this was against regulations, and they were turned down. 180 huts were transported to the new security zone over the winter road and set up on the piles driven in the autumn. And early in the spring, 180 prisoners were installed in these primitive huts with bars on the windows. One fine spring day, the warden stood in one of the watchtowers and surveyed the extraordinary scene before him. On the 200 hectares of barbed wire enclosure, 180 plots had been delineated, divided from each other by stakes and brushwood, with the occasional border marked by a length of stretched wire. Those are the wealthy ones, decided the warden. Their relatives must have sent them the money, not just to build their cell, but for their border markings too. Lanes and footpaths ran between the plots, with a common space for meetings at the center. In some of the low-lying areas, the snow had not completely melted, but on the little hills, the first green blades of grass were already showing. On almost every plot, the warden could make out the dark outlines of isolated human figures which appeared faceless and identical in their warm prison jackets, cloth caps with ear flaps, and rough, artificial leather boots. What could these isolated, faceless figures possibly create on this empty ground? Why weren't they staying in their cells? The warden peered through his field glasses and focused in on one of them. It turned out to be prisoner Kotakov, thrusting his spade into the ground, which was still partly frozen as he dug another hole. Shifting his field glasses around, Nikolai Ivanitch counted 19 holes already dug in the half-frozen ground around the perimeter of Kotakov's plot. All over the zone, figures in dark jackets were doing exactly the same thing, digging holes around the perimeters of their plots. Why so many holes? Nikolai Ivanitch wondered aloud. They're for the saplings and bushes which will grow into a green hedge surrounding each plot, the guard explained. I see. Couldn't they wait a week or two until the ground is thawed and digging will be much easier? I told them as much, but they don't want to wait. They're afraid they won't get it out in time. Get it all in on time. Each one has 400 meters of hedge to plant. That's no light undertaking. And once the ground thaws out, they'll have to start work on their vegetable beds. The warden spent quite a while longer observing the zeal and dexterity each of his charges displayed as they worked, and he mused. There must be some kind of cosmic link between the soul of a man and the soul of the earth. If that link is there, man is in harmony with the planet. If there is not, then there is no harmony. Corruption sets in, the crime goes up. Of course, that book, Anastasia, must be quite exceptional. All the cons have read it, and something inexplicable has erupted in their hearts. It's happened with me, too. I read it, and now I've started looking at life differently. Of course, this book is playing its part. Prisoners all over the country are reading it, but the book's strength is really in how it brings out man's relationship with the earth. In other words, that relationship is primary, and one should never attempt to sever it. And all this talk about high morals and spirituality is nothing but idle chatter without this mysterious relationship which is not yet fully comprehended. By autumn, all the plots in the new zone, as the prisoners themselves called it, were framed by still only partly grown saplings of apple trees, pear trees, rowans, birches, and all sorts of plantings, which, with their leaves decked out in their multicolored autumnal hues, created a most pleasing picture to the eye. Approximately 1,500 to 2,000 square meters of each hectare had been planted with forest saplings. Even by that very first autumn, the view from the watchtowers over the 200 hectares below gave a distinctly different and positive impression compared to the desert-like black earth that could be seen everywhere the preceding spring. It was abundantly clear that the whole enclosure was being transformed into an exceptional oasis of green. All summer long, the new zone provided the prison cafeteria with fresh greens, cucumbers, tomatoes, and beets. In the fall, each prisoner offered up, from the plot of land entrusted to him, 5 sacks of potatoes, along with several dozen jars of salted and canned cucumbers and tomatoes. The prison commissioner was provided with a whole winter's supply of beets, carrots, horseradish, and other vegetables. An unusual scene took place in the autumn in the new zone's controlled entry point, in contrast to all other prison facilities in the world, where foodstuffs and other treats would be passed to the prisoners from the outside. In this new zone, they were moving in the opposite direction. The soldiers handed out jars of preserved vegetables to the prisoners' relatives. Many had come by car and left with a wealth of produce in their baggage compartment. Prisoners who did not have any relatives living close by sold their part of the harvest through the soldiers to food wholesalers at a handsome profit. Nobody came to see prisoner Kotakov, however. He did not have any relatives. He had grown up in an orphanage and had asked to have his portion of the harvest sent to the nearest children's home. Nikolai Ivanitch earned the administration's gratitude for a successful carrying out of their order. He was the only warden able to accept a new contingent of 180 prisoners without a worsening of holding conditions for the remainder. The past year had been the busiest one for Nikolai Ivanitch in all his 20 years of service. Apart from his usual duties, he was also responsible for prying seeds or saplings for their new zone out of whatever source he could, but he felt a shiver of delight every time he saw the old prison zeal pull up, loaded to the gills with young saplings. Footnote: zeal, a standard lorry or truck produced by the major Russian Soviet automobile factory. That's a long footnote. I'm not reading it. 5 more years went by. Then, one fine July day, a helicopter appeared and began to circle over the new zone. Nikolai Ivanitch stood at the controlled entry point and watched the helicopter fly over. He knew that on board were General Pasashkov and members of a committee dispatched by the Ministry of Justice. Perhaps someone had sent in a complaint about the warden, or it might have been simply rumors, but in any case, word had spread that about a peculiar prisoner holding regime. After the helicopter landed, the committee members, all highly placed officials, stepped out onto the open space in front of the entry point. But Nikolai kept standing and thinking only about the zone's security perimeter. Yes, it is clear I shall be charged with a violation of regulations here. Why did I ever give permission for these climbing perennials to be planted around the security perimeter? They've already climbed up 3 meters, a full height of the barbed wire, formed a hedge, so the wire can't even be seen by all the different flowers. The barbed wire, you see, they didn't find aesthetically pleasing. They even put on climbing plants and flowers around the watchtowers, where they have wound their way right up the guard's lookout. Now the whole thing doesn't even look like a security zone anymore. It looks like some kind of paradise oasis amidst fields overgrown with tall grasses. Here, if you please, the first violation is already quite evident, said the general, representing the ministry. What kind of security perimeter have you got here? Anyone who wants to climb can climb over a barrier like that, all wound around with vines, the general went on, turning to Pasashkov, the administration chief. Any soldier will tell you that. Right? Am I right? The ministry representative addressed the lieutenant on duty at the entry point. Permission to answer, General Sir. The office duty responded, standing to attention at his post. This is such a long chapter. Answer when you're asked a question. Is there any violation of regulations here? Negative, sir, General Sir. In this instance, you are simply looking at a tactical improvement of the security perimeter of prisoner holding zone. What's that? One of the minister committee members was taken back. What kind of tactical improvement are you talking about? What kind of drivel is that? All the committee members stopped beside the lieutenant, standing at attention. Oh, that jokester, mused Nikolai, feeling ultimately let down. That Lieutenant Prokhorov, again with his endless jokes, if only he could control himself in front of the committee. Now, for certain, they will never pardon this ridicule, and he stands there at attention without so much as a blush. The lieutenant began talking, spitting out his words. Permission to answer the question on improvement, sir. Answer if you can, ordered the general from the ministry. By tactical improvement, do you mean the flowers? Yes, sir. If any criminal tries to escape by climbing over the barbed wire entwined with flowers, he will not get very far. Why is that? Asked the general in astonishment. In the process of climbing over the perimeter fence, intertwined with the fragrant flowers, his whole body will be infused with their scent, which means they will go that even an inexperienced dog will be able to easily track him down and bring him back. So he'll be infused, the general broke out into a loud guffaw, and the committee members joined in. And the dog will follow the scent of flowers. Pretty nifty, Lieutenant. Imaginative. And how many escapes have your dogs brought back that way? He asked the general through his laughter. Not a single one, sir, replied the lieutenant, and continued in all seriousness. Since the criminals realized the futility of any attempt at climbing the fence, there has not been a single escape attempt in the past 5 years. The committee members felt even more exhilarated by the lieutenant's serious look and his declaration. You mean to say there has not been a single attempted escape from this security zone in the past 5 years? The committee head asked the administration chief. That's right, not a single one, replied Pasashkov. The committee members, clearly pleased by the lieutenant's sharp-witted responses, put the following question to him. Tell us, Lieutenant, if no criminals even attempt to escape from the security zone, then why the armed soldiers in the watchtowers? To protect the zone from the outside world, replied the lieutenant. What does that mean, to protect from the outside world? You mean people won't try to break into the zone? Affirmative, sir, the lieutenant responded. Many of the prisoners' wives have declared their wish to live with their husbands in their cells. Some of them have requested permission to spend the summer in the cells along with their children, but our strict enforcement of regulations will not permit any lawlessness. So a few conscientious wives took it upon themselves to either try getting through the hedge or tunneling underneath, but all such brazen attempts have been thwarted by the zone's excellent security force. Uncertain as to whether the lieutenant was joking or speaking seriously, the committee chair inquired of Nikolai Ivanich, have there been instances like this? Affirmative, replied Nikolai Ivanich. 2 such attempts have been thwarted. I received 96 applications. Oh my god. This is the longest fucking chapter. It's still, oh my god, it's still going on. I don't know if I can finish it today. I received 96 applications from prisoners' wives wishing to spend the summer with their children on their husbands' plots. But apart from the conjugal meetings provided for in the regulations, nothing like this can be permitted. I wonder what it is that attracts them to the security zone, especially with the children, mused the committee chair aloud, adding, "In any case, colleagues, let us go in and take a look for ourselves." "Open the gates," Nikolai ordered the lieutenant. The wooden gates, decorated with traditional Russian carvings, quickly opened up, and the committee members entered the security zone. They had hardly gone a few paces when they all at once spontaneously stopped. Seen through the helicopter's viewports, the zone had had the appearance of a beautiful green oasis, but here on the ground, it was not only the delightful footpaths of mowed grass, not only the multicolored living fences around the perimeter that struck the committee members. Accustomed to the odors of their offices and city streets, they were now gracefully enveloped by the delicate fragrance of summer plants and flowers. The silence was broken only by the singing of birds and the humming of insects, sounds by which no means irritated but soothed people's ears. "We should visit one of the plots," said the committee chair, for some reason in a hushed tone, as though afraid of disturbing the general atmosphere. The prominent officials walked up the pathway of the first plot they came to, heading for the cell hut. The little hut was actually surrounded by a metal cage, though this was scarcely visible unless one examined it at a close range. From a distance it looked like a little green hillock, wound around with various vines and surrounded by flower beds. It blended in most harmoniously with the surrounding space. At the entrance to the hut stood a man in a white t-shirt, his back to the approaching visitors. The prisoner was oiling a metal lock bolt, energetically trying to slide it back and forth. This was something of a challenge, and the prisoner was so absorbed in the task that it was a while before he became aware of his visitors. "Hello, Harlamich," Nikolai greeted him. "Make our guests feel at home. Introduce yourself." Harlamich quickly turned around. After momentarily losing his bearings upon seeing visitors, he quickly regained his composure and introduced himself. "Prisoner Harlamich, sentenced according to Article 102 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation to 12 years. Served 6 years at the cell block, 5 years now in the new zone." "Then what have you been doing here with your door?" asked the committee chair. "I've been oiling the exterior bolt, Chairman, sir. It started sticking quite a bit, and the metal they produced today is not very good quality. It rusts quickly." The committee chair went over to the door leading into the cell, closed it, and tried shoving the bolt into position. It did not budge on the first attempt, but he finally got it to work. Then he turned, and with a meaningful glance to the administration, Chief Pasashkov declared, "So you claim you're following all the regulations for prisoner holding to the letter. Does that mean after completion of their workday, they're all locked up in their cells?" The administration chief was silent. Everyone realized that the metal bolt had rusted and was hard to budge for the simple reason that it had not been used for a long time. Prisoner Harlamich realized that he had let his superiors down. Thoughts began running through his head. "Should have fixed the damn bolt a long time ago. How can I explain to these people that this log is completely unnecessary? Nobody here would even think of leaving the zone or running away from his land. To what purpose? Where would they go?" As for Harlamich, here he was in his native space, where here was his motherland. It was here that he was greeted every morning by the singing of birds and the waving of the branches of trees that he himself had planted. He had even been raising a little goat, which he had named Nikita, along with a dozen laying hens and a couple of beehives. Others had their own homesteads, setting them up just a little differently, but for each one it was his own homestead, on his own piece of land. And here he had gone and let down his warden with his damn bolt. Harlemich was really upset. He began talking quickly and excitedly. I'm the world's worst son of a bitch when it comes to this bolt, Chairman, sir. I have no excuse if it should reflect badly on my buddies. Only I want you to understand. Please let me have one last word here. Let me tell you, my whole life has changed. Not just changed, in fact, my life has just begun in this place. I'm free here. Out there, outside the gates, there's no freedom out there. Indeed, that's where all hell breaks loose. The soldiers up there in the watchtower, they're like angels to us. We pray they don't let any scum in here. The prisoner's voice, with its heart-wrenching emotion and the content of what he had to say, worked its own unique effect on the people standing by. All at once, one of the committee members, a woman deputy from the State Duma, suddenly burst out. What is all the fuss over this measly bolt? Don't you see it rained last night? The bolt started shriveling. The committee chair glanced at the metal bolt and the woman and burst out laughing. Shriveling, you say? Why didn't I think of that before? It did rain after all. And the bolt began to shrivel, and it rusted, and up in the towers, those are angels, you say? Angels, Harlemich echoed. Tell me, when is your time up? In 11 months and 7 days. How do you propose to live after that? I've applied to have my sentence extended. How could it be extended? Why? Because out there's no freedom. There's no order in that kind of freedom. There's no freedom without land. And who's stopping you from going free, getting a piece of land and creating the same kind of homestead that you have here, only as a free man? You could get yourself a family. You know, Chairman, sir, that's something I never understand. Who's stopping us here in Russia from giving each Russian a hectare of land? I will never understand. Does Russian land belong to Russians or not? Right now, according to the law adopted by the State Duma, everyone has the right to buy land, observed the woman deputy. And what if I don't have the money, even to buy a single hectare of land? Does that mean I have no motherland? That's the way it looks. I don't have it, and I never will have it. But if Russia is my motherland, who am I supposed to buy it from? It turns out somebody has seized up my motherland for themselves, the whole country, down to a single hectare, and now is demanding a ransom from every last Russian. There's some monkey business going on here, beyond the law and beyond our understanding. You, Chairman, sir, Harlemich addressed the committee chair. I see by your stripes that you're a general. So liberate our motherland from whoever seized it and is demanding a ransom. Or are you going to be paying a ransom for your own little piece of the motherland?